Our story's protagonist endured immense suffering at the dawn of his life. From the moment he was born, death was his predetermined fate, had it not been for his father, Mayong, who chose to save him, even if it meant battling his own family and abandoning them forever. Mayong carried his infant son, Ok, and fled from the looming danger. However, the path to salvation was not paved with roses, as Mayong remained relentlessly pursued by his uncle and his followers. Undeterred, Mayong bravely fought his pursuers with his sword, and as soon as he ensured they were injured, he continued his journey with utmost speed. Midway through his escape, his uncle intercepted him and commanded him to surrender the child, or else he would take him by force. Mayong fiercely resisted until the last moment, affirming to his uncle that he would never abandon his son, no matter the cost. He pleaded with his uncle, explaining that Ok was an innocent child who did not deserve punishment, but his pleas fell on deaf ears. Mayong continued running to save his son's life, and his uncle attacked him from all sides. Mayong fought back with unwavering strength and managed to inflict a severe wound on his uncle. He attempted to seize the opportunity to escape, but his uncle threatened him with dire consequences. His uncle tried to bargain with him, offering to forgive him and let him go unpunished if he handed over the child. But Mayong remained resolute and faced his uncle once more in a fierce battle. The sword fight continued until Mayong sustained a deep wound, yet his determination remained unshaken. The numerous wounds Mayong inflicted on his uncle weakened him, and he fell to the ground, begging for mercy. He pleaded with Mayong to surrender the child one last time, but Mayong declared that he would take his son and hide far away, living in secrecy for the rest of his life. He asked his uncle to let him go and not pursue him any longer. Mayong turned his back to continue his journey, but he asked his uncle to inform his father of what had transpired and to consider him dead from that moment on. His uncle promised to try and speak with his father, but he was unsure of his reaction. Mayong departed and disappeared from his uncle's sight, who decided to return and cease his pursuit. Thus began a new life for Mayong and his son Ok, as they settled in a village called Yunjan on the first cold night of the year. The villagers welcomed them warmly and agreed to let them live among them. Our protagonist, Ok, recounts that he doesn't know whether the villagers' quick acceptance was due to the sight of blood on his father's sword and clothes, or their pity for his dire situation as a helpless infant. Ok lived with his father Mayong in Yunjan village for 3 whole years. Every night before Ok went to sleep during those 3 years, his father would whisper words in his ear for him to remember, saying, "I want you to hold on to your dream, but don't reveal it to anyone. I gave up everything I owned for my love for your mother, and then sacrificed everything, even my family, to save you. Don't think I regret it. I just feel some sorrow for what happened to us and what we could have been. Sometimes I think about how our lives would be if I hadn't left everything, and it occurs to me how wonderful our world would be if you were a normal child." Ok says he always saw his father's longing for the past when he looked into his eyes as he spoke of his old homeland. He remembers when his father would sit and teach him his name, and his mother's name, Sue. Mayong would be happy when he saw him memorize them, and he would always emphasize that he should never forget them. Mayong died 2 days after the last time he embraced Ok while reminding him of the same words. Ok was only 4 years old at the time. All that Mayong left him was the remnants of their dilapidated house and some miscellaneous items of little real value. And of course, the most important thing he left him was his name and his mother's name, which Ok kept repeating until that moment. But life took its course, and Ok found himself homeless and orphaned after his father's death. He would sit on a mountaintop, contemplating his misfortune due to his father's early demise, and wishing he could bring his father back to life. He had heard that wishes come true during meteor showers, but he realized it was all a myth, and even if he wished all night for his father to return, it would never happen. At that moment, Ok descended from the mountain because he heard that new people had moved to the village, and he decided to go and see who they were. We know that his father had entrusted the villagers to feed and shelter him in exchange for sharing the inheritance he would leave behind. But as soon as Ok turned 6, the villagers stopped helping him for free and demanded that he work for food. From then on, Ok realized that nothing was free, and that they would continue to deny him food as long as they couldn't exploit him for labor. When Ok returned to his father's house, he found a group of villagers preventing him from entering. One of them told him to stop begging because there was nothing free in this world, and that what his father had left behind was already gone. They warned him not to return to the house again, and explicitly told him to find somewhere else to sleep. After being expelled from the house, Ok lived in a cave full of bats. He couldn't sleep due to their noise. He would yell at them to leave him alone, and the bats were bothered by him because they saw him as an intruder trying to take over their space. Ok says that these bats were the only things he could yell at and raise his voice against. Otherwise, he was helpless. One day, while walking through the village streets looking for something to eat, he found the village children mocking him and calling him the Bat Cave Vagrant. They blocked his path, and one of them asked him why he came down to the village streets, even though he wasn't welcome. Oak told them he came to find something to eat. He knew that the strong in those times liked to dominate the weak, so he tried to avoid them. The child told Oak there was nothing to eat here and ordered him to leave. Oak replied that he hadn't eaten anything since morning and needed food. He was tormented by the idea of being known as the neighborhood vagrant. The child yelled at him, saying whether he ate or not was his problem. The boy punched Oak in the face, then pounced on him, raining blows until Oak fell to the ground, writhing in pain. The boy standing over him said, "I warned you and told you to leave." Oak retorted, "I was going to leave as soon as I found something to eat." The children were angered by his insistence and hurled insults and more blows at him. One of them threatened, "I'll finish you off today." Oak was battered and bruised, unable to endure more, but he knew that even if he were strong, he wouldn't be able to defend himself and fight back. The parents of these older children wouldn't tolerate their kids being hit, as he had learned before when he had struck a bully, only to be punished by the bully's mother. After the children finished beating him, they told him he didn't deserve to eat anything. At that moment, Oak realized that no one cared about him and that he was just another street rat in their eyes. The children left after warning him that they wouldn't leave him alone if they saw him again. Oak thought to himself that he knew he would have to leave this place someday and that he would do so as soon as he could rely on himself. Oak struggled to his feet, covered in cuts and bruises. Just then he saw another boy and his sister waving at him. The boy's name was Jonak, and his sister was Sheyong. Oak knew they were from the family that had recently moved to the village. Jonak asked Oak if he lived in the village with them. Oak was surprised by Jonak's kind demeanor, so much so that he didn't respond out of sheer astonishment. Jonak introduced himself and offered to be friends. Oak, still stunned, replied that he was just a vagrant and asked if Jonak still wanted to be his friend. Jonak said, "Of course. And by the way, my mom says we shouldn't judge people by their appearance alone, because that's not a fair judgment." Shong, Jonak's sister, was even more impressed with Oak than her brother. Oak asked them again if they really wanted to be his friends, even though he was just a vagrant. Jonak smiled and assured him that they did. Oak was overjoyed and said, "Okay, we'll be friends from now on." This was the first day since his birth that Oak had a real friend. Afterward, the three of them walked together through the village streets. But this angered the other children, who felt that Jonak was treating Oak, the vagrant, in a way that was beneath him. They were even more surprised by Sheyong, who they had expected to hate vagrants. One of the children suggested that they grab Jonak and teach him a lesson, but the others objected. One of them explained that Jonak's mother was the daughter of a noble person, and if they did anything wrong to him, their parents might kill them. They were convinced by this argument and tried to find another way to deal with the situation, as they couldn't stand seeing Jonak and his sister with Oak. The friendship between Jonak and Oak deepened, and Jonak offered to teach Oak the letters of the language. Oak was surprised, not believing he could learn. Jonak laughed and assured him that he could teach him. Sheyong told Oak that her brother knew many letters and could teach him. Oak was excited and asked Jonak to start teaching him immediately. Jonak suggested they go to the riverbank to write the letters in the sand. Once they got there, Jonak began teaching Oak the letters. The first thing he taught him was his name. Oak was deeply moved as he learned and kept looking at his name. Then Jonak asked him to tell him his father's and mother's names so he could teach him how to write them too. Oak told him their names, and he couldn't hold back his tears when he saw their names in the sand. Oak thanked Jonak profusely. Sheyong drew her brother's attention to Oak's tears. Oak returned to the cave where he slept after learning 9 letters and said he would never forget this day because it was the day he first learned to write his father's and mother's names, which made him open his eyes to a new world. Oak carved his name and the names of his parents on the wall of the cave, under the eyes of the bats gathered, watching him in amazement and astonishment. Oak then realized what Jonak had done for him, and vowed to return the favor and do anything for him and Sheyong, no matter the danger or sacrifice. A year later, the bonds of friendship between the 3 children were strengthened. One day, while they were walking in the streets of the village, a child called out to them and told them that he wanted to talk to them. Jonak went to him and asked him what he wanted, and the child told him that he wanted Oak. Behind the child was a group of bullies, so Oak realized their bad intentions. He went to the child with a serious expression and asked him what he wanted. One of the bullies laughed and told his friends that the tramp was still arrogant. Oak asked them if they had called him just to say these words to him. The child who called out at first pointed to one of his friends and told Oak that this boy told him that Oak had grown up and knew how to punch hard. Oak understood that the child wanted to fight him, so he firmly replied that he does not get into fights with anyone. The child told him that he would make an exception for him today and allow him to fight him. Oak realized that they would not back down, and Sheyong began to feel scared. Oak protected Jonak and Sheyong with his hands and told the bullies that they should only talk to him and that none of them should go near Jonak or Sheyong. The bully addressed Sheyong and asked her to go play and leave the tramp Oak. Sheyong refused and said that she wanted to stay with him. The bully told Oak that he deserved to be beaten. Oak started to feel annoyed because they kept bullying him and saying that he only understands by being beaten. The bully told his friends that they were right, and that he was sure that he had to hit him. He warmed up his hand and ran towards Oak and punched him hard, and told him that it seemed that he liked to be hit a lot, so that he would not feel himself. Jonak and his sister were shocked for Oak and did not know how to help him, but Oak asked them to stay where they were and not interfere, and that he would deal with the bullies. Oak returned the punch to the bully, who got angry and cursed at him, and hit him again. His friends were sure that their friend was strong, and no matter what Oak tried to do, he would not be able to defeat him because he had learned martial arts in the Black Tiger sect. The bully provoked Oak during the fight and told him that he had allowed him to fight, so he should be up to the challenge and try to hit him. Oak endured the pain and waited for the right opportunity to respond with a stronger blow. Indeed, he dodged the bully's last punch and hit him with a strong punch in the face, knocking him to the ground and bleeding. Oak pounced on him and continued to hit him. The rest of the bullies got angry and ran towards Oak to defend their friend, but Oak grabbed the bully by the neck with one hand and with his other hand grabbed a large brick from the ground and warned them that if they came closer, he would hit them with the brick and seriously injure them. He ordered them to stop immediately, so they listened to him. Oak threatened the bully that if he dared to touch Jonak or Xiong again, he would not leave him until he hurt him badly. Oak raised the brick over his head as if he was going to drop it on the bully's head, but Jonak called out to him at that moment and asked him not to do it. So Oak actually stopped, but he stared at the bully and told him that he hoped that he would remember his warning so that what happened to him today would not happen again. The bully replied, scared, and told Oak that he would not do it again. After that, Oak got up from him and threw the brick from his hand. He found the group of bullies standing there, stunned by what he had done to their friend. He intimidated them and then took Jonak and Xiong to continue their way. Xiong rejoiced and said to Oak, I knew you would win. As they walked, Jonak expressed to Oak that he felt a strange power emanating from him today in his fight with the bully. Oak replied in surprise, I really don't know when or how that happened, but I've noticed that people have started to be wary of me and I don't know why. Oak realized that he had changed a lot from before, although he didn't know exactly when this transformation began to appear. Even though he hadn't undergone any special physical fitness training, he noticed that his strength had doubled on its own, and his movements had become much faster. Stranger still, he had become able to sense danger before it happened, a talent that most people don't possess. Jonak offered a possible explanation. Maybe you have a sixth sense. Oak was surprised because he had never heard of the term sixth sense before, so Jonak said to him, I don't remember the exact name of the book I read it in, but I'm sure I've read about this topic before. Oak asked if having a sixth sense was generally a good thing, and Jonak replied, of course it's considered a superpower. Oak said sadly, but that makes the villagers treat me like a ghost. Oak's sadness was evident when he remembered what people said about him, claiming that he could predict events like priests, and that his life in the Batcave had affected him and caused him to become haunted by ghosts. To make matters worse, they had started to think about expelling him from the entire village because they believed that a person haunted by ghosts should not live among them. But Jonak took the matter lightly, laughed, and told Oak that the villagers said that because they were ignorant and didn't know anything. Xiong agreed with her brother, asserting that there was no reason for Oak to become haunted by a ghost or anything else. Oak was reassured by their words and said to Jonak, your words make more sense than theirs, and I'm proud of how smart you are. Thanks to Jonak's words, Oak understood the meaning of his ability well and was happy to have such a special power, which he could use to protect himself and his friends. Days passed until summer came, and with it came a severe drought that affected the entire village. One day, the weather changed and it rained, but the rain was very heavy and accompanied by thunder and lightning. Despite the joy of all the villagers with the rain that would end the drought, Oak was the only one who was not reassured and felt that the rain was too much and might cause them a disaster. He saw the villagers in the streets happy with the rain, while Oak remained feeling the danger and thinking of his friends. He was somewhat reassured because Jonak's house was located in a high area of the village, so if a disaster occurred due to the rain, they would not be harmed. However, the bad feeling from the increasing rain continued to dominate him and did not let him rest, especially since this feeling was very similar to his feeling of danger before it occurred. So he decides not to wait for the danger to strike. He rushes out of his cave and runs through the village streets, warning the people. He shouts at the top of his lungs, urging them to seek higher ground and protect themselves from the impending disaster. But the villagers dismiss his warnings, claiming they've been waiting for this rain for a long time and that he's imagining things. Oak, however, persists in his cries, calling out to a woman named Jean to warn her of the danger. The villagers grow irritated by his noise, telling him to go to sleep if he has nothing better to do. But Oak remains deeply worried, especially for his friend Junak. He hopes Junak is safe and that the high ground where he lives will protect him. Oak reaches Junak's house and feels somewhat reassured to confirm that the area is indeed elevated, but he wants to be more certain as he senses the danger drawing nearer. He knocks on Junak's door and keeps calling out, but no one answers due to the roar of the rain and storm. He tries to convince himself that they simply can't hear him over the weather, but he's sure they're all right. Shivering from the cold, Oak decides to return to his cave. Moments later, the storm intensifies, and the river floods the village. People are seen running through the streets, desperately trying to escape the rising waters. Oak rushes back to Junak and Xiong, who are already caught in the flood. They are on the verge of drowning, and their mother is clinging to a wall inside their house. Junak and his sister are crying in terror. Their mother begs Oak to take her daughter and flee, telling him not to worry about her and to prioritize their safety. Junak, however, cannot bear to leave her and stays put. His mother screams at him to go, but he refuses. In desperation, she cries out, "I didn't raise you to die beside your mother, nor to let your sister die with you because you won't listen." At that moment, the walls of the house collapse on her. Junak and Xiong scream for their mother and break down in tears. With her last breaths, their mother tells them to get out quickly. Junak finally obeys, standing devastated in front of the house that has swallowed his mother, weeping bitterly. He is unable to move until Oak arrives and pulls him towards higher ground. Oak urges him to hold on tight and run, warning that they will be caught in the flood if they delay. Junak hesitates, but Oak insists, telling him to trust him and run if they want to survive. Oak takes them both and helps them climb the mountain to safety. Once they reach higher ground, Junak remains heartbroken over the loss of his mother, crying and repeating her name along with Xiong. Oak apologized profusely, blaming himself for not arriving sooner. He believed that if he had, this tragedy wouldn't have happened. He explained that he did come earlier, but made the mistake of leaving when he should have stayed longer. After the floodwaters receded and the situation stabilized somewhat, the surviving villagers were in shock over the loss of their loved ones. Everyone had lost someone dear to them, whether it was a child or a spouse. They were so devastated that they wished their loved ones could come back to life. Oak observed their grief, which reminded him of his own state after his father's death. But since meeting Junak and Xiong, he had focused less on his loneliness and more on what he could do for them. Suddenly, Oak was startled to see Xiong fall into the river. She would have been swept away by the current if not for clinging to a tree branch. The villagers stood by, stunned, but no one was brave enough to attempt a rescue. Oak rushed towards her, shouting at the idle onlookers. He took a rope from them, tied one end to his arm, and jumped into the river to save Xiong. Junak arrived at that moment and was shocked to see his sister in danger. He reassured Oak, explaining that he was a skilled swimmer and would retrieve her immediately. Oak, determined to save her no matter what, jumped into the river. He encouraged himself, repeating in his mind that he could do it, for his friend's sake and for his own, as he felt a connection to them both. The branch Xiong was holding onto was about to break. She cried out in fear, and Oak swam faster to reach her. As he got closer, he extended his hand for her to let go of the branch and grab onto him, encouraging her not to be afraid. She assured him that she wasn't, and let go of the branch. In a tense moment, Oak managed to grab her hand and pull her away from the current. He helped her out of the river using the rope that Junak was pulling from the shore. Although Xiong was saved, Oak was caught in the current and swept away, unable to swim against it. Junak worried for him and decided to jump in after him, but Oak urged him not to, as the area was dangerous. Junak ignored his pleas and jumped in to save his friend. At that moment, a carriage carrying a distinguished person passed by the riverbank. The person expressed admiration for Oak and Junak's bravery. Junak managed to save his friend, just as Oak saved his sister. The distinguished person, who turned out to be the great leader of the heavenly sovereignty cult, named Hu Zhang, asked his companion, Tag, which of the two children he liked more. Tag pointed to one of them, and Zhang understood that he meant Oak, as he jumped in first. Zhang ordered Tag to bring the children and the girl with them, declaring his intention to take them to his cult. Tag, the carriage driver, flew off to carry out his master's orders. Meanwhile, Oak, Junak, and Xiong were overjoyed at their survival and enjoying their time together. Oak playfully punched Junak, saying no sane person would take the risk he did. Junak replied that he did it because Oak was his friend. Suddenly, Tag appeared before them and used a mysterious power to render all three unconscious. He then took them and transported them in the carriage to the heavenly sovereignty cult.